Uncle Ray and I got married, he was going to be a preacher, so we had to go for training up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was in the woods, real big like this. And so we had a little old church. It was just old store building, really old. And so I would invite you. Here, you can scoot that over there. Yeah.
Ryan, stay right here.
I sit right there on the floor. It'll be okay. So anyway, I want you to know that this little store set up here in the busy part of the highway, and then back behind it was like a valley, but they called it the pocket, like a pocket, you know, and because the road curved around and went around down into the valley. There was a little creek that ran back there, and back there was a little poor white house called where the Olivers lived. And the Olivers are the one who cleaned our church. They were the janitors of our church. And so they had a little boy and a little girl. The little boy was named Roger, and he was 9 years old. And the little girl was Kay, and she was 12. And so they were riding their bicycles down this road, and riding along, pedaling along, you know. And there's big, thick trees on all sides, and a little bitty narrow road going in the pocket. And all of a sudden they heard something coming through the brush. Crashing, crashing, crashing through the bush. And they saw Whistling Jack. Whistling Jack is what his name was. And it's a legend up there in those woods. And so they got so scared, they jumped off their bicycle and they ran all the way home back to their little house. And just shook up. And they came to church telling us about it. And somebody else had seen it, the Whistling Jack, not just a few days around that time. And it had come up when they were cooking meat on the stove. And it smelled the meat cooking. And it came up and stuck its big old paw underneath the door trying to get in. There's a big crack under the door. They were little poor houses. They didn't have paint on the houses there. They were just poor. Because the coal miners, that's what the men did for a living, was to work in the coal mines. And they had a strike because they wanted more money. And so the union people brought in what they call the scabs. They call the men scabs. It's an ugly old name, you know, because they took their jobs. And so they were having a war up there on that mountain. And when my husband and I got there, would see them sitting out, several of them outside the highway, on the side of the highway with rifles. And one day they came by, my husband was asleep in the back seat of the car, and they shot in the front of the car and woke him up. And I was in there in the baby bed. I was real little then, because we nearly starved to death up there. And so I was sleeping in the baby bed. It was a great big baby bed, and I was taking a nap up there because we had to go and stay all day. And for the morning service and the night service, you know. And so, I jumped out of that baby bed. I went running out there, and he sat up in the car, you know. They just did it for neatness. And but they had blown up the whole town of Palmer, Tennessee, because they were warring back and forth, back and forth. And they had blown up the movie theater, blown up the only grocery store. So you had to go way down into Whitwell, down in the valley, to town, you know, to get anything. And so it was a wild country back then. They said, if you come upon a still when you're picking berries, that's when they make moonshine, you know, which is liquor. And he said, if you do that, you just keep picking berries, because you'll get killed if you tell there's a still up here. So, you know, I mean, I never had been around anything like that. I always lived in a small town and, you know, civilized. So anyway, they came to church telling us about the Whistling Jack. They were so excited about it and told us, described it, that it was big, about like a great big dog. It had a great big long tail that came up on his back and on the belly, shake hair on it. And so, it just gave me the chills, because I would go visiting by myself up there, visit the people, you know, the little boys and girls in the community. And I had to go in the deep woods, and every time I took a step, I'd hear something crashing behind me. It would just scare me to death. So anyway, I was real scared about it. But anyway, so one day, Mr. Oliver took his coon dogs, and he had a great big old German shepherd dog, or Collin, I think it was a collie dog. And he left at the house with the wife and the children, and he took his hound dogs and went coon hunting at night. So he left right at dusk, it was just getting dark, and he took off hunting. And so they were sitting there in the house, and all of a sudden they heard this barking from this dog, just real loud, just barking at something. And as the light shined out in the back of the house, it stopped about where the creek stopped, and they saw something walking up, you know, just barely in the light, coming closer to their house. And they were scared to death, and that collie, it tucked its tail and ran under the house. It was so scared. And so they looked out of the window, and they saw it coming up on the porch, coming around on the front porch. And so they took a chest door and pushed it up against the door, you know, so they could stay there, and they were just trembling, you know, they were scared to death. And so all of a sudden, you know, when they pushed that door up, oh my goodness, you know, it would. Your darling. Oh, that's your uncle. He's teasing you. Oh, bless your heart. That was a joke. He was pulling on you. He was being funny. Oh, honey.
Have you ever heard the story?
Huh?
Have you ever heard the story?
Well, other people had seen it, you know, but it never hurt anybody. It always traveled along the creek there, and